Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. And I think even if previously you were unaware of the importance of container ships to trade on the global world stage, after the Ever Given being stuck in the Suez Canal and in the last 6 months or so, the huge backlog of container ships outside of Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, most people now realize just how important these large ships are to global trade. So container ships come in all sizes, from small coastal and transfer feeder size ships to the intermediates, all the way up to the largest ships that are even too large for the enlarged Panama Canal. So they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And the reason for that is if you make the ship bigger, your crew size doesn't necessarily go up. Your fuel size or your fuel burn only goes up slightly, but you can fit a whole lot more containers on board. So today we are looking at Revell's 1/700 scale Colombo Express. And I'm not sure when this came out, sometime in the last couple of years. I didn't see it until last summer. Actually, it was sometime around the time that the Ever Given was stuck. And I thought it was good timing that the hobby shop happened to have it on their shelf. I did not buy it right away. I waited until just this very past Christmas when I had a couple of gift cards for the hobby shop to pick it up. So, the Colombo Express, what exactly is it? It is owned by the Hapag-Lloyd shipping group, which is not one of the largest. Certainly, they're well behind Maersk, MSC, and a lot of the Asian ones, but it's one of the larger European lines. Now, the Colombo Express is not one of the largest ships currently. It was the largest ship when it was built, and let me correct that. The largest container ship when it was built in 2005. And it was a class of 8 ships, all, of course, being very, very similar. And as I mentioned, it was the largest at the time until the Emma Maersk was built in 2006. Now it's 2022. 22? God. Anyway, time does fly. So there have been many newer ships built even larger than the Colombo Express. But it's still probably in the top 30 in terms of size. So this is a review. I'm not going to be building it right now. So if anyone's going to jump on the keyboard, call me all kinds of names because I didn't build it. I do believe that somebody else has reviewed this and built it all in one episode. I have not actually watched that video because I want to give you my opinions of the kit. That video got about 10,000 views, so we're talking a small, very small portion of YouTube model viewers. So that's why I don't feel I'm really duplicating things by showing it here on my channel. For some reason or other, a lot of the Revell kits that I end up reviewing are huge. I've got my camera tripod perched up on top of something precarious here just to get enough distance so we can get the whole thing in. So let's take a quick look at the box before we unprecarious things. So you can see we've got a nice painting here on the front. It's Revell's current style of box. We look on the side here. We've got a blurb in 6 different languages. We've got some close-up pictures of how you can finish it and an overall picture here. We flip it around. We can see they've got some paint suggestions over here and an advertisement for their paints and glues. And then here we have kind of a jumble shot of all the parts. And they're calling this a level 4, which is pretty challenging on the old challenge-o-meter. So let's get this box open and meet the parts. Alrighty, let's get it open. Shove that back there. So we have several bags, and they've all been wrapped up tightly and taped closed. This one, we can safely assume, is our hull in 2 pieces. It's not quite half a meter long, so not enormous, but big nevertheless. And I'll be taking these parts out of the bag in a few minutes. Our next sprue has this very large piece here. I'm assuming that's going to be our deck, and this is probably the stand, and we got some other detail bits there. And this bag here appears to have, I'm going to assume these are containers. This has more containers and some structures. And guess what? More containers. And then we have a decal sheet, and we have a full color instruction manual. Oh, looks pretty complex, but I don't think it is. So we'll take a look at the instructions first. So of course now you had to put up with me not being able to turn pages. We've got the usual warnings and legalese. Please don't eat the parts. Got paint callouts here, and then we have a sprue map and another sprue map. Quite a few sprues in here. And then we start with something obvious like putting the hull together and the propellers and such. And these look like to be the container racks. More container rackage, and then we've got, this looks like the bridge. And then we get into the containers. Now the containers, despite what these pictures show, are not little individual Lego blocks. That would be a challenge. That would be several thousand little Lego blocks to put together. What you see here is basically the several blocks of containers all together. So one section would be like this, or you'd have all the 20 footers together. And we'll see that more when we get into the parts. So you're basically building a bunch of containers all in a block. You can see here them being blommed in place. And then we have a painting guide, and I think this comes with the decals for their sister ships. It's not very sleek. It's pretty much just a floating brick, a little bit of rounding at the front and stern. And this page intentionally left blank at the back. So looking at our first major parts, we have the hull sections, and we basically have a 2-piece hull, which is nice. It's a pain when you have a join right in the middle there. Splitting things fore and aft. Certainly looks well molded. You're not looking at a lot of hull panel seams, but this is 1/700 scale. You should not particularly see them at this scale. As you can see, there's some springiness to this. We're going to be needing some tape and elastic bands and things to get things to line up. But that's pretty normal for most ship models. Now, if I bring it up close here, this is a nice little detail. If it will focus, there we go. You can see that we have the bow thruster molded in. That's quite nice. We, of course, have the openings for the anchors to go in there. The only other part to close in the hull is going to be this bit here on the stern. That'll have to be glued in. But I don't see anything scary about this part. Our next big sack bag contains this part. This is the deck. The main deck, I should say. It doesn't quite have the very pointy bit of the bow on it. This area is for the superstructure, which is the funnel and the accommodations and navigating bridge. If we look closely here, you can see there's some winches. And once again, 1/700 scale, that's about all you're going to see of them. As I mentioned before, we have the display base, and this actually was tooled in 2009, so we're talking like 13 years ago. This is obviously a newer release of the ship, of the kit. Certainly hasn't been hiding, but I think this is, like I said, a fairly new re-release of this kit. And given how much container ships are in the news, it's probably accounting for some of the popularity of this. Looking here, we've got, this is our deck for the bow, and these are some bulkheads to go inside. They're structural. The real ship, they don't look like this. They have a bunch of slots in them to hold the containers lined up. But you can see we've got some superstructure details here. And this, of course, is our stern. This piece here, or this sprue, has got our accommodation, navigating funnel block. And you can see it basically looks like an apartment block. And how often can you ever actually see anything out of most of these windows? I think most of the time you're looking at a multicolor wall. And these stairs, we'll zoom in on them. You can actually see the treads of the stairs going down, which is nice. Nicely done. Now, our next 3 bags of sprues are mostly containers. I say mostly because this first one, you can see here's the top of the accommodation block with the various moldings for building the bridge. And we have some other support structures here. And we do have some container parts. And this sprue has got more of the supporting structures for the containers. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah. These are basically the sides of our big blobs of containers. Is that the best way to describe them? Blobs, stacks, Borg cubes of containers. And more container parts. Now, some of these represent 20 footers and some represent 40 footers. This section here, if we get close, you can see this is some 20 footers with 40 footers stacked on top. Got a few more support structures on this sprue, plus yet more blocks of containers. And more. This may be a duplicate of one of the earlier ones we saw. And this stack all have the same identifier, so there's no point in looking at all 3 of them. These are all sprue G. And once again, you can see we've got more and more containers. They do look very crisply molded. One thing I will say is that the corrugations on the sides are not present. But you can question whether or not that's something you're going to be able to perceive in 1/700 scale anyway. I will point out one potential challenge about the way they've chosen to mold the containers. And not every container ship is sailing with a nicely fully cubed out load of containers. A lot of times you'll see, one row will have one or two missing or something like that. And especially if it's if it's already made its main transit across the Atlantic or the Pacific, it's already gone through the Suez Canal. And let's say it's on its third port of call in Europe. It will have already unloaded some, it will have already reloaded some empties, and it's going to look a little jagged. And with all the containers being molded this way, that's going to be a little bit hard to represent. It might have been nice if Revell had given us maybe 30 or 40 containers molded separately so that you could place them to make some rows that aren't 100% complete. That's about the only thing structurally with building this that I think, perhaps they could have done differently. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with doing the containers all as a big brick. And my suggestion for building these is put the big bricks together, and then I would say probably airbrush or spray paint them a neutral gray color or something like that. And then if you're going to be painting a lot of them orange, mask some of them out that are going to be gray, paint them orange, and then maybe mask out most of the orange ones, and then paint some blue and red and other colors and things like that. And hopefully it doesn't drive you crazy trying to make it look random while still being something you're doing consciously. Okay, here is our decal sheet. And as I suspected, this is a re-release. You can see 2017. And if we look at these names here, we have the large Hapag-Lloyd that goes on the side of the ship. And then we have, it looks like we've got 6 of the 8 members of the class here, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now these large ones, I'm pretty sure, are for the stand. The small ones here would be for actually putting on the ship. And you can see we've got, let's focus here. These are the logos number 11. That indicates bow thruster. We can see the Hapag-Lloyd logos for the funnel. And then, and I think this is probably my only disappointment in this kit is, you can see number 40 here. These are all container logos. And of course, they are all for Hapag-Lloyd. I understand why. Probably Revell didn't want to go to the expense of going to 6 or 7 different container companies and purchasing a license to use their logo. And so, seeing as this is a Hapag-Lloyd ship, they just decided to give us a whole pile of Hapag-Lloyd logos. So if you want some of the containers to say Evergreen or Overseas Orient Container Line, MSC, Maersk, that sort of thing, you're going to have to print up your own decals, which isn't impossible, especially if the logos are gray or blue or black or something like that. The difficult ones are going to be ones that are like Evergreen, where it's a white logo, because we know how difficult it is to print decals in white. So, but yeah, I understand they only wanted to pay for one license, which is Hapag-Lloyd, but it would be nice to have like a whole slew of different container ship names to put on there. So that wraps up my review of the Colombo Express, which is Hapag-Lloyd's, what I say it was 13 or 14-year-old. No, actually, it's a 18-year-old container ship. But it's not like you're going to look at it and say, it's not the latest and greatest. You're going to put this on display. I mean, I think you'll be happy with this as a kit. I know somebody in the comments is going to say, make it the Ever Given, make it the Ever Given. It may look like all container ships are exactly the same, but the bridge would have been in a different place. There would have been different funnel arrangements. The overall size of the ship is different. Yeah, you could kit bash it to do that. I'm not going to. I'm going to just build it as the Colombo Express, or maybe one of the other expresses. I don't know. But that would be an interesting idea for somebody to do. But don't just think you can paint it green and call it the Ever Given and it's going to be accurate. It won't. So, don't know when I'm going to be working on this. People who've watched the channel for a long period of time know I've got well over 100 kits of various types, and I never know which I'm going to grab next. I can be thinking I'm going to be working on something for 6 months. This is what I'm going to work on. This is what I'm going to do next. What I'm going to do next. And then I'll finish up a project and I'll do something completely different. Because that's just what happens to lodge into my brain at the time. So, until next time, thanks for watching, and keep on modeling.